Today's episode is about suicide. Welcome to When Docs Talk, Unanticipated Goodbyes.
When docs talk, when docs talk, when docs talk, when docs talk.
So before we bring on our guest, for those of you who are just joining us, I want to remind you that there is a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
And actually, we want to let you know that that number has changed. As of July 16th, 2022, the new number to call is 988. 988 is the new lifeline.
Without further ado, though, I do want to bring on our guest. And our first guest is actually someone that we've had on When Docs Talk before. We're so excited to welcome back Dr. Erica Goodwin. Dr. Erica Goodwin is on a mission to help you be better, do better, and live better. She is a Harvard-trained, double board certified psychiatrist, best-selling author, top-rated speaker, integrative lifestyle coach, and creator of the hit podcast, Better with Dr. Erica. She is a graduate of Spelman College and Emory University School of Medicine, and also completed her general psychiatry residency at Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Erica works with organizations and high-performing individuals who are stuck and want to get back to getting better results and living a better life. Within a few moments of being with Dr. Erica, you can see why executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs hire her to get to the next level. She takes Ivy League strategies and simplifies them into easy to use for everyone to relate to her story. Dr. Erica is known as one of the few medical professionals who will tell you what they don't tell you, but you really need to know. Her evidence-based methods go against the grain of common myths about success that sound good, but don't really work. She will show you and your organization's secrets used by some of the world's greatest achievers and translate them into practical steps that can change your life forever. Dr. Erica's story is proof that when you know better, you can do better. And we are feeling better just for having us here or having her here with us today. Dr. Erica, welcome back.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so I have the pleasure of introducing my friend, Dr. Jonathan Orr, a PhD. So he's an associate clinical professor and the program coordinator for the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program at Georgia State University. In these roles, he has trained and supervised psychologists and counselors for over 17 years in the field of counseling psychology, school psychology, mental health counseling, school counseling, and rehabilitation counseling. He is a licensed professional counselor and approved clinical supervisor who is active as a practicing clinician. In addition to this time at the Georgia State University, he owns Breathing Space Counseling and Wellness, and it's a private practice dedicated to working with a wide range of clients. He also trains, consults, and supervises psychologists and other professionals in the practice of group psychotherapy and counseling interventions such as narrative exposure therapy, focusing, and mindfulness-based interventions. In addition to his private practice, Jonathan also consults to professional and community agencies related to the topics of interpersonal dynamics, traumatology, and diversity and inclusion. He is also a project director for multiple mental health initiatives within refugee and asylee communities in Clarkston, Georgia. And these projects focus on training lay counselors in narrative exposure therapy so that they can begin to heal trauma in their own communities. He's also served as president of the Association for Specialists in Group Work, a professional organization dedicated to the practice and scholarship of group and interpersonal dynamics, and served on the governing council of the American Counseling Association in the U.S. He is also a member of the Vivo International. It's an NGO organization that aims for research, prevention, and therapy of the consequences of traumatic stress on violence and conflict affected individuals and communities. So Jonathan, when we were asking him about, joining us on When Docs Talk, he was saying that he wanted to join the conversation because suicide is a complex community mental health issue that is heavily laden with stigma. It is often hidden and misunderstood, which leads to further avoidance or denial. The more time we take and dedicate to addressing this topic in an open and direct way, the closer we can be to reducing barriers to support and treat for those contemplating suicide. So thank you very much, Dr. Orr, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you,
for
Dr.
coming.
Orr. Thanks so much for coming.
Amen.
I have the pleasure of introducing Walter D. Moody, also known as Moody. Walter D. Moody is a father, activist, artist, and published author of the suicide note turned book, Moody Was Here, Amid a Manic State. Walter penned Moody Was Here, a book journaling his thoughts as he went face to face with 2 years of suicidal depression during the pandemic. The main character of his own story, by way of Oakland, Mississippi, Moody is an advocate and community organizer for social injustice and mental health while serving as a private wellness consultant throughout the Southeast region. As a graduate of Arkansas State University, Moody is not only a student of life to those he serves, but a father to his 6-year-old son, King Moody. And in his latest project, Moody Was Here podcast show, Moody provides safe place and platform for those struggling to continue to live, as well as highlights those who have testimonials that inspire others to keep living. The witty and surprisingly comical sketches bring a new meaning to the phrase laugh now, cry later, by capturing his humor for life and all that comes with it, while reminding people to laugh 3 times before noon in honor of his late aunt, Dr. Carol Gary. Lastly, the words he initially wrote to leave this world have become his mantra and the fuel behind the Suicide Man mission in the mental health community. By turning the can'ts into cans, Moody writes and assures us all that together we can survive in this world much longer and our minds can get much stronger. Moody was my fitness coach, my trainer when I was in residency, when I was much bigger than what y'all see right now. And I am so happy that this man has entered into my life. If there is a higher power, this man is proof of it. Get the book. And also, Moody, I told you I had a gift for you, baby. Straight from Blivel. I got you a nice wire hanger.
Oh my God.
Right here for
One of
you.
the biggest inside jokes that have never died down between us. I love it.
Oh, it's definitely inside. I'm like, man. We're so excited to have you, Moody. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank y'all for inviting me in. I love it. Thank you so much. I tried to get on Strayer University last night to give me some credentials and get up with you guys, but they weren't gonna let me be a doctor in 24 hours. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna show up.
We're gonna give you some degree before you leave here. Don't worry.
I love it.
All right, let's bring on our final guest. I have the pleasure of bringing back to When Docs Talk Dr. Uduak Afanide, who is a licensed professional counselor and founder and CEO of Afanide Therapy. She is also a professor at Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. She also taught at the University of Calabar for 15 years and then relocated with her family to Montgomery, Alabama, where she has been teaching for 13 years in the science department. She is the immediate past chair of the Department of Natural and Physical Sciences. Dr. Afanide felt the need to invest in the mental well-being of students, which prompted her to seek a degree in mental health counseling in 2017, and ultimately to found Afanide Therapy. As an advocate for mental wellness, she states, the goal at Afanide Therapy is to destigmatize therapy among people of color, and we have various initiatives to make that happen. She is the author of 5 books, including a textbook for non-majors biology used at various universities in Alabama and Tennessee. Her latest book is My Therapy Notebook, a companion on your mental wellness journey, published just this January. An advocate for trauma survivors, in our episode on gun violence, Strapped, she spoke with passion about us needing to be a voice for those who are struggling to find their voices. We are so honored to have her back with us. Please help us welcome Dr. Uduak Afanide, who we affectionately call Dr. A.
Hey.
Good to be here. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you back.
Good to be back. I think this is an important topic, and I'm so glad to be part of the conversation because it needs to be had. The conversation needs to be had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just put a little note to our viewers. We want you involved in this discussion. Thank you so much for those who have commented already. Let us know if suicide has impacted you in any way, shape, or form. Type yes, WDT. But let's get back to the discussion while we have our viewers do that. I want to start out by asking our guest, and we can start with any of you, but I want to know your personal experiences with suicide. I know that you have professional experiences with suicide, almost all of you, if not all of you. But tell us how suicide has impacted you personally.
All right, now one at a time, guys. I'll go ahead and go. Everybody calm down. Everybody calm down real quick.
I was actually hoping you would
I
go
couldn't
first.
find my trackpad. I was trying to unmute myself. I wasn't hiding, Moody. I wasn't hiding.
Okay, most definitely. I'm quick to call somebody out for certain now. Most definitely, like I said, I want to thank everybody. Thank y'all for just having me here tonight. I'm definitely intrigued about where this conversation will go. Like I said, I've had my own personal experience with suicide. It was one of those things that I definitely didn't see coming, and I'm not sure if anybody ever sees it coming whenever it comes down to it. Mine started, I guess, I would say definitely during the pandemic. As you know, most of us were like in quarantine, in isolation. So it's one of the things that we found out how much of ourselves that we had to learn about ourselves, honestly, when being in that time alone. And for me, it was one of those things that was a graduate, a slow graduate increase as the days went by. I can't even tell you like exactly the day or what event just kind of like triggered by any means. It was kind of one of those things where I went through some changes in my family dynamic. I went through some changes when it came down to my financial situations as well. So it was just one thing after another. And then just kind of one day I woke up and I was like, man, I'm feeling something that I never felt before. I'm like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? And as you can guess, I'm always kind of being one of those guys that's joking all the time, always happy, always the one that's like, making sure that the room is full of like joy and laughter. And it wasn't there one day. And I wasn't the one to able to like pull myself out of it. And I got to the point to where I was like, man, you know what? I'm like really tired of just like, being here, in a sense. I've never been one to like just kind of be prolong things. It's like whenever I identify something, I'm like, oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm suicidal. What are we going to do about this today? You know what I mean? So that's when I really kind of got into that mindset or whatnot. And honestly, like I said, I've always been one to also try to put my best foot forward. So I started to also try to look at for as like identifying before I decided to, if I wanted to leave this world, all right, obviously I'm not happy. So I want to be happy again. And then I realized, I was like, I don't even know what makes me happy. The pandemic made us really spend a lot of time with ourselves. I had the opportunity or the pleasure, the luxury of being busy all the time. Mm-hmm. So when you're busy all the time, you don't have to look at yourself a lot of fashions. You don't have to do a lot of self-care, self-work in that regard. So I just woke up one day and I was like, all right, before we go down this road and, it was a real road. I was like, all right, let's do the work first. And I'm always one to like try to put my best foot forward and put that work in. So I asked myself, what makes you happy? And I couldn't think of nothing at all. And so it took me a little bit of time to set with myself. And then I realized I was like, okay, we're going to have to keep going back a little bit further, because everything that I associated with happening wasn't there anymore. And it wasn't going to be there anymore, whether it was people that had been in my life who had gone, or there was things in regards to like my professional career that's not there anymore. So I'm like, all right, we got to keep going. So eventually I landed on just finding the opportunity to just go back into my childhood. And that was one thing that I didn't never even realize that plays such a big factor. You hear people talk about like, trauma starts in certain different areas in your life and you hold on to different things. And it's like one of those things that I look back at my childhood where I started realizing that a lot of the things that I was struggling with came from just forced like abandonment issues when I was dealing with my dad, you know what I'm saying? Him just not being around, that was one of those things for whatever reason, it just like hit me overwhelmingly or whatever. And it got to the point to where I started just thinking like maybe there wasn't anything that was going to make me happy. But I decided to just kind of like really put that happiness to rest. I was like, you know what? There's nothing that's going to make me happy. There's things in my life that still are constants from since I was a kid. So it's like, why would I even think that here I am at this age right now that there's going to be something that's going to change? And my story, like I said, it got very deep, in myself. Like I said, I talk about it in my book, and I really just start to write down everything. And I'm a very, very passionate person in everything I do. So whenever it got to the point that I wasn't comfortable with my life anymore, I was passionate about it. I was passionate about how I was going to leave this world. I was passionate about like making sure I was prepared to leave this world and everything that came with it. So for me, it was going to be one of those things where it wasn't going to be a big hoorah. It wasn't going to be nothing that was going to be out of the ordinary. It was going to be a normal day. And one day it got to the point that I was fine with it. I was heading down to Mississippi. I had like decided I was just going to go stop by my mom one last time just to go just stop in, see my mom, see my dad. And then I decided like I was just going to figure out what it was going to be next after that. I'm really one of those guys that you kind of just go with the flow type of deal. And like I said, who I was in my real life and my characteristic was who I was in those moments. I was like, I'm not going to overthink this. I'm just going to kind of be spontaneous, go with the flow. If today is the day, then I'm like, yep, today is the day. So that day in particular, I drove down to Mississippi, and I'm probably like 10 minutes away from my mom's crib and like that. And I decided to call one person. And it was this one person who I decided to like reach out to for whatever. And to this day, I don't know why I called that particular person or whatnot. And I had I used normally kept like a knife on me no matter what, typical country guy stuff or whatnot. So I was like, I can get this done real quick, make it real neat. And that's the thing about me. I don't like people had to like clean up, certain things after me. I mean, I say I don't like people cleaning up after me, but I'm sure my girlfriend can go against that. But I like to be trying to neat, keep things, I try not to be a house of people. So I was like, I'm just going to kind of get it done nice and neatly. And I called this one person, and I told them kind of like, what I was about to do. And they were too busy. They were about to go on a date. So, and honestly, for whatever reason, you would think that would like drive me to the edge, or like, damn, I'm like, my life wasn't even important enough for you to like just stop, change your plans up or something like that. But for me, for whatever reason, it's just like, all right, today is just not the day. I was like, here I am looking at myself, what are you searching for? Why did you call this person? What are you searching for in other people that you can't find in yourself? Why did you feel like you need that call? Why are you going down the things that are the most cliche? Let me get that phone call. And I realized in that moment that I was following a pattern. I wasn't like being myself. I was doing what everybody else was what everybody else would normally do. And that's something about me I don't normally do. So I end up coming back to this house, and I started thinking about that question again, what makes me happy in it? And as a kid, I remember just like, I loved like spending hours and times of like just drawing and art and whatnot. And so I just got on my wall that's behind me.
Yeah, I can see.
And I just started drawing. And like each day, whenever I start feeling a certain level of depression, I just got on the wall. I just draw, and I invite people over. I'm like, let's get on the wall and keep drawing and like that. And it was definitely a tough time each time. Every day was tough. It was never a day that I was like comfortable with the fact to tell everybody like I was okay or nothing like that. And even to this day, as I'm sitting in front of you right now, and I can't even tell you 100% that it won't cross my mind again, because it might, you know what I mean? And like I said, depression comes in spouts in different times. So for me, my suicide story definitely is one that's sporadic. It's not one that would have like a definite day or a definite certain type of event. I can list a bunch of things that went into my mental state whenever I was going through it. But at the end of the day, what matters, I'm living in it now. I'm here today, and that's all that matters for me. So my suicide story is a continuing story.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. EM McRib is saying this is so powerful. I'm trying to put this up here. This is so powerful, Moody. Thank you. I think that your story is even more powerful because it's going to allow people to know that they're not alone. Your story is unique, of course, but it's not unique in a sense that you're the only one who has considered it, especially during the pandemic. As I was looking through some of our stats, we see that there was a sharp rise in suicide and depression and anxiety during the pandemic. I want to throw this question up here. How can we tell if somebody is thinking about suicide? Because I'd like some of our experts to weigh in about this, because a lot of people feel like they want to know how they can help somebody that they're worried about. Are there warning signs?
Jonathan,
I'll start with a really simple thing. The way you know is by asking. Just to be really direct with people all the time. And part of, I think, reducing the stigma is to make it a conversation that's not reserved for like scary times, or this is the end conversation we should have with someone. It really needs to be a beginning conversation that we have with people all around us, loved ones, strangers on the street, just to work it into our everyday language and our everyday conversation, just to talk to people about that.
Well, what does that look like, though? I guess from the standpoint, I think, really it's so hard a lot of times when people are running around. And once again, from the standpoint, we all have to kind of put on a certain face.
Oh, yeah.
And how we're in our jobs, with our friends and that kind of stuff. And so how do we create a dialogue where we're open to discuss these things? I mean, let alone even if I'm having a bad day and I feel bad, but then to that extent that I can feel, open enough to talk about if somebody was going to harm themselves.
Definitely.
I think it starts with just engaging in a conversation about how are things going. You started out a wonderful conversation today about little news blurbs. That can be a segue into just talking about someone's experience. Hey, how's the pandemic been for you? What's been your experience of it? We can have these conversations in grocery store lines. We can have them like hanging out on social media. We can do these kinds of things. And then just really broach the topic of like, hey, sometimes folks can feel really, really low. And when they feel really low, have an option of like harming themselves. And are these thoughts that you're having, or these things that you've ever considered? And it's an awkward conversation. I'm not saying it's really easy or sophisticated. I mean, I do this for a living, and I still stumble with these conversations with people. So sometimes just asking really directly, do you have thoughts of harming yourself or hurting yourself? Can we talk about this? Ending your life? Do you ever wish you weren't here? Do you ever feel like you're such a burden on people that it'd be better off without you? Those are all kinds of coded ways of talking about suicide or stating suicidal intent.
So just kind of closing the gap on silence, maybe, because there's so much isolation. It sounds like you're just saying, it just starting off with a conversation in general, maybe not about suicide, and then kind of going into it slowly. Is that what you're suggesting, Dr. Orr?
Absolutely. Yeah, to decrease, I think the piece with COVID too is exacerbated. And I heard some of that. And Moody, thanks so much for sharing your beautiful story. It was really powerful for me to hear. But that piece of social isolation is a huge indicator of suicidal ideation. When somebody feels excluded, alone, isolated, they don't have a sense of belonging or connectedness. And so, sometimes just a conversation with someone to say, I see you. How are you doing today? Seems like you're having a rough day. Let me pick up that for you. Let me help you with that. Kind of just getting those, the social connection that we've lost, I think, with COVID. And then also some of the climate that we have around how people talk to one another, the way we interact with each other in conversation, that we've created more distance than closeness.
Thank you. Any other warning signs that some of our experts can weigh in on?
I'd like to. But I also want to piggyback on one thing that Dr. Orr said, and I'm so glad you brought this up, is when you're having some of these conversations, and I noticed Dr. Pinson mentioned this too, is kind of how do you do this in the midst of running around and being busy? Part of the key of having these conversations is at some point we all have to stop, because you have to actually, it's two things, intention and being present. And it's hard to have these conversations if it's in the midst of running through things, and people don't necessarily feel like you're present enough to have that depth of conversation. So one is just making sure that when you're having these conversations, that you're actually present, because most likely someone's not going to open up to you if you're not present. The other thing is, I want to go just a little bit deeper into, in our clinical terms, we talk about helplessness and hopelessness. And that's where you get to the part that Dr. Orr was talking about, kind of, what is it like if you're not here anymore? Do you think about not being here anymore? So if you hear people start saying things like, it doesn't matter if I'm here, nobody loves me, nobody thinks about me, nobody sees me, or they're giving away things, or you notice that patterns just are totally changing dramatically. You have someone that was social or used to talk to that's not talking to anyone and is totally isolated. And I know we've mentioned depression a lot. The other thing is, there are other kinds of mental health conditions that can have higher prevalence of suicide. And I don't want us to lose, especially given the pandemic, the increase of substance abuse.
Oh, yeah.
So also, if you notice someone is just really struggling, they're, they could be smoking weed or having edibles all the time, or they're blacking out, or, they might be using a little of cocaine or something else. But just if you start noticing these changes and this seeming just kind of lackadaisical or not caring, that can also be a sign.
Thank you.
I want to definitely piggyback on that as well. Like I said, the signs are somewhat are there. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? For us, looking for the signs, you got to actually look. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes they're not as hard to see. Whether it's, like you said, substance abuse, or one of the big things for me that I know is that weight loss, or something like a change in fluctuation in weights and everything. Is for me. I got super small, mad small, like I said, and so many people are so used to me looking at me a certain type of way, being a fitness professional of that sort. So whenever I start losing weight, I'm like, I know y'all see me over here looking mad small or whatnot. So, but they would have to look, and even the ones that look, they might have turned a blind eye to it. It's a tough conversation. Like I said, like Dr. Orr said, you got to be willing to have that conversation, and that's tough. If I'm coming to the doctor and there's no help. Is no help for me if I don't tell y'all and show y'all where it hurts at. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If I just walk through the door and just I'm hurting, and you ask me where, and I'm just, I'm not telling you anything about my symptoms. So, but at the end of the day, it takes communication on both ends. There's different signs. And, like you said, the substance abuse is one of the biggest things. You see someone who's doing something different than what they normally do, just going down a pattern. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that people just want to die. They just want to get rid of the feeling. And everybody knows that that feeling of certain things, you want to just kind of get rid of that feeling. When you see someone chasing that high in a certain sense and whatnot, just kind of get rid of those feelings. That's really the big sign. But honestly, it takes a lot of just looking. Certain things that you see in a person, no matter how good they got it together, you can tell when they're different. It's it can be the slightest off. You something is off about you. You can always, for me, I can always kind of tell when people invite death in their life a little bit.
Yeah.
If they're carrying it for someone else, or even if, like I said, it could be their own, but it's something about when the death is in you, or you're around you or in your family, it's you can see it, you can smell it, and it's one thing, but it still comes to the person that in your circle, you got to look at it, and that's something tough to look in the eye. Are we, everyone sitting here, everyone that's on this video, are you prepared to look death in the eye? I'm saying? It might be your own death. It might be somebody else's death that you see, but being able to look that in the eye and just being able to say, hey, let's just have a conversation. Don't turn it other way. Don't just chalk it up to, oh, they must be on a different weight loss plan and you haven't seen them.
Right. Say something. Basically, say something. And it's hard. It's easier said than done, because people also don't want to offend people, right? You don't want to offend your loved ones. You don't want to offend your friends. Sometimes it's somebody who's in an authority position for you, and you don't want to offend that person or get them in trouble, is another thing that I hear about. But just to kind of, answer the question even a little bit more, because you all have so eloquently answered it. Talking about wanting to die, that's a hallmark that should be taken seriously. Talking about feeling hopeless or having no reason to live. Talking about feeling trapped or feeling like there's no way out. There's no solution to my happiness. I think, Moody, you were saying that. Feeling unbearable emotion or physical pain, or talking about being a burden to others, I think somebody else has mentioned. And also the withdrawal from family and friends has also been mentioned. That is another potential warning sign. Giving away important possessions, all of a sudden things that you know mean a lot to this person, they're giving it away. You have to ask why. You have to wonder why. And saying goodbye. You know, there are some people I've spoken with recently who mentioned that they felt like they should have known something might have been wrong when their friend that committed suicide said, "I love you." And it just sounded so final. Putting affairs in order, all of a sudden making wills and saying, if something happens to me, do this. That might be a hallmark too. And then taking great risk that could lead to death. Some people talk about driving too quickly, or things that are just risky that you know are dangerous and reckless behaviors might be another warning sign. And talking about or thinking about death often is another thing that's cited, or extreme mood swings, or making a plan or looking for ways to kill themselves. If somebody all of a sudden buys a gun, or if there's somebody who has chronic pain and they're stockpiling medications, you notice that they're saving their pills. These are things that are concerning. Talking about feeling great guilt or shame. And of course, Dr. Erica already mentioned substance abuse. These are all things that could be a hallmark of possible suicide that's impending.
I agree. You know, and I think that thing that I would want your viewers and your listeners to walk away with. I mean, I live in Atlanta. If you're familiar with the public transit system, but it's a pretty common phrase, right? If you see something, say something. And I think that's really important for us not to fall back on being polite, but to talk to people, to notice things about people, to say things to people, people that are close to us, as well as strangers. If like, hey, looks like you're having a rough day. Is everything going okay? Just that little bit of a connection or communication with somebody. I think as Moody kind of talked about in his story too, that there is folks that are contemplating suicide, even those that have moved all the way to a plan and action, and they have intent and means, that they do reach out, and there is some kind of communication to others. And so there is that desire for connectedness.
Absolutely.
When dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk, when dogs talk. When dogs talk, when